Hello everyone, this is DM Gashbad. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm 5 games into the Batman miniature game, so I'm going to give a quick review of what I think of the rule set and the game, and it's going to come from a little bit of a different angle. You can find other people's reviews of the book of the game online. What I'm going to talk about is the issues I had with what I knew about the game going into it, why I hesitated jumping into this immediately, and what I think of those things right now after a couple of games. So I imagine there's a few people out there that are thinking along the same things as I did going in. They're interested in the game, but they have a few concerns, and hopefully that this will address them and tell these people whether or not this is the game for them. So while I'm talking, so you don't have to look at my hands waving around or an empty table or anything like that, I'll just be showing a series of some better photos of my objectives and my Green Arrow crew that I've been using, just to have something to look at. Anyway, let's start with the first issue, and that's the sheer complexity of the rules. This really concerned me at first. If anyone has downloaded the original PDF document that Night Models released, they put out a PDF of the Batman rules that was free to download. You could take it, theoretically you could learn the rules from that and then get into the game. I'm gonna tell you I would recommend against doing that. The document is not very good. It's really difficult to learn from that. The translation is really bad. Just little things for the most part, but also it's just hard to figure out. For example, here's something that just bothered me about that PDF document is that instead of calling a hit, you roll and a successful attack results in a hit. In that PDF document they keep calling it an impact, and that just seemed really strange for me, and it was hard to get over and it was hard to follow the rest of the rules. The ping roll, which is very confusing trying to learn it from that document. It wasn't called a ping. If you grew up here and you grew up on English comic books, you understand, someone's shooting at you and they make ping, ping, ping. These noises go off when your bullets or arrows hit things in the way. Well, I think in that PDF document they called them blinks or something, and it just made it hard to read. Besides other grammatical errors and that kind of thing. Anyway, I know the book is expensive. It's like $50 US. If you're interested in the game, you probably want to make that investment. Just go ahead, buy the book. Don't try to learn it from the PDF document. If you have friends that have the book, that's even better. You can watch YouTube videos online. There's a number of good ones. I recommend Guerrilla Miniatures games. I recommend some of the old Can Hammer episodes, battle reports. Now, those would probably give you a better idea of how the game is played than trying to figure it out from the online resource that they put out years ago. Plus, the rules have changed anyway, so it's not going to help that much. Anyway, but as to the current state, let's say you have a book or you have an understanding of the rules, either because you know someone that really knows how to play. How does it work in practice? Well, from my experience, it depends on who you're playing with. If you're just learning the game, and you're playing with someone who absolutely knows the rules inside and out, you're not going to have very many problems. Now, I had a little bit of an understanding of the game. I'd watched a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of battle reports about the game. Like I said, I was interested beforehand. So I had an understanding of how the game worked. So going in, I felt that the game went very well. There were very few problems, very little confusion. It flowed really well. I liked it, but that had a lot to do with the other person really knowing the rules. Later on, when I played some people that didn't know the rules as well, things got more difficult. Not necessarily that the game ground to a halt or went off the rails or anything, but there was a lot more looking up things, checking things, questioning things. It just made it a lot more difficult. So if you're looking to get into this game, one of the things you might want to take a look at is, are there people that are already playing this game and really know the game? If you have that resource available to you, then I would say, yes, go ahead, get into the game. If it's going to be you learning the game from scratch and then teaching other people, or if there's a group of you that are all going to be learning the game at the same time, it's going to be more difficult, in my opinion. So that's something to consider. So there's a lot of things that happen in the pre-game. You're rolling the scenario, you're setting up the street furniture, that sort of thing. That is all right. It's complicated, but you're under no particular time pressure. You can go through the book piece by piece and sort it all out. That's not so bad. When you're actually playing the game, that's when there's more of a stress. You want to keep moving. You don't want to slow down play for the other player. That's when you really want to have things down. And the rules themselves are, yeah, they're really complicated. Besides the rules in the main book itself, every character has just a ton of special rules, and they're listed in different places. And let me show some stuff. So here's Arrow right here. So you can see he's got his stat line, and those all mean particular things. And that's fine because they mean the same things for every character. But then you see, he's got what kind of thing he is, and those matter a little bit. But then he has all his personal traits, and these are all particular special rules that you may need to reference in the book. And then you have special traits, and those are listed on the card itself, but again, it's a whole other thing. And then, of course, you have all his weapons, and all his weapons have special rules as well. So it ends up that this one little card, it doesn't really give you everything you need to play. It is stuffed with references to other rules in the game, and some of them are really hard to follow. Let me give you an example. John Diggle here, I've been giving him a piece of equipment called riot gear. So now let's say you're playing the game and you give him riot gear, and in the middle of the game you think, okay, I need to remind myself what riot gear does. So you look in the book, you look under riot gear, and it says it gives the character the hockey gear rule. And you think, that's so unhelpful. All right, so I go through the book again, I look up hockey gear, and it tells you that it cancels the sharp and heavy rules. That's great. Now I have to look up the sharp and heavy rules. So it could have been done a lot more easily. If you're not as familiar with the game, if you're not as familiar with the more common rules, things get really difficult. So what I did before my first tournament is I actually made these 3x5 index cards, and I listed out all the special rules that the character has and gave me a brief description of them. So for example, Diggle, for his riot gear, I'm sorry, it's football gear, not hockey gear. I cut out all that back and forth. I didn't say riot gear, look up football gear look up sharp and heavy. I just wrote it down right there, and that's not so bad. So, but you can see from right here, Arrow has a lot of special rules, and until you become used to them, it's going to take some time. But writing down these cards really helped me. I mean, once I write them down, it kind of sticks in my head, so I don't actually need to reference these that much. And you can see Arrow's got a full card to himself. Flash, of course, has a full card to himself. Diggle has a full card to himself. But the police have, your henchmen, your non-special henchmen, have a lot less special rules. So you can see I've got a full card here, but this covers all the police with all their weapons. So each police officer, they really only have a couple. You can see Gotham policewoman, Officer Hall, she's only got one personal trait, arrest, and her weapon only has 2 traits, defensive and handy. So once you know those 3 rules, you're good to go. You don't have to look up anything else for this particular character. So this really helped me. So if again you're looking to play the game, I would recommend taking the time before the game, make yourself some of these cards so that when you're in the game itself you don't have to look up as many things. Now, even with all this, even after a number of games and all this prep and that kind of thing, there are still some things that are confusing. There are unusual exceptions to the rules that come up even with experienced players, and movement is a challenge. As soon as you start getting into things like climbing and acrobats, the rules are more difficult. The rules for moving are more difficult than I would like. Does it mess up the game? No, but every so often there's a situation where I think a character will do something and it turns out they can't, and it's a little bit problematic. I think that'll go away as I get more experience, but again, that's my honest review of the complexity of the rules. Does it mean don't play this game? No, but if you're the kind of person that doesn't like how complex this is, maybe it's not for you. So the next thing I want to talk about that initially made me hesitate as to whether to pick up this game or not is the use of counters, action counters in the game. So reading it on the page or even watching some of the videos, it makes you really nervous. You have to put action counters down before your character activates and gets to do their thing. And so I was really concerned that that would mean my characters would be out of position. They would want to do one thing, but I haven't put the right counters in the right place, and they wouldn't be able to do that thing that I really want them to do. So I want to reassure people on this one, unlike the rules where I say maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I want to reassure you on the counters that it's really actually not that bad. A lot of people that I've played with really like the veteran skill where they get to rearrange the counters, and honestly, I don't think it's very necessary because I find myself almost always doing the exact same thing with the counters. And let me give you a couple of examples just to show you how it's really maybe not so bad. So we'll stick with Oliver Queen right here. Now the point is with the counters is that even though you can put them in a lot of different combinations, there's really only a couple different things that you're really going to want your characters to do. Oliver Queen isn't going to run in and attack a bunch of people in hand-to-hand combat. He's going to shoot people. So first off, let me tell you, he's got a willpower of 7, so he gets 7 counters to spend, assuming he's not injured. So right off the bat, we know he really wants to shoot people, and shooting people takes 2 action counters. Now, beyond which, he's either going to stand still and rapid fire, or he's going to bat claw, probably, or run, and shoot somebody. Now, either way, you're going to want 2 counters in special. It takes 2 special counters to rapid fire. It takes 1 special counter to run or bat claw, plus 1 special counter to use good aim to be able to fire his bow. So no matter what he's doing, so long as he's shooting, he's going to want 2 counters in special. So that's more than half of your counters already distributed. So the only 2 columns that you'd want to add more to is either movement or defense. And since I don't really want him in a position where someone's going to come up and punch him, it's almost always going to be in defense, or excuse me, in movement. So that's almost always where his counters go every single time. He's going to have 3 counters in movement to either move around or to dodge. He's going to have 2 counters in attack, and he's going to have 2 counters in special, and that's it. So really not too bad. That covers a lot of situations. Let's go on to the Flash. The Flash, again, has 7 counters. His attacks are terrible. There's almost no point in him throwing punches. They only do 1 stun damage, and he's just not very good at doing it. So forget about attacks. Now he's great at movement. Now I just stick all 4 counters into movement. He'll use those to dodge, or he'll use those to zip around the board. And then he's got 3 counters left. Well, he's going to want at least 1 in special so that he can run. And then he can put 2 in defense in case someone punches him. That's what I usually have, or somewhere in there. These don't get used that much. So whatever, doesn't matter. So long as he has 4 in movement and at least 1 in special, he's good to go. A lot the same with Diggle. Diggle doesn't have as many options to move. He's only got 2 movement that he can do. So he gets 2 movement every time because I want him to be able to buzz around. He will often have 2 for attack because he's really good at shooting. There you go. And then he's probably going to want 2 in special, either so that he always has the option to run, or to use the lantern to shine light on someone so that someone else can get him. And then you can either drop 1 in defense, or sorry, he's only 6 willpower, so that's almost always where he is. And last example I want to give is these cops. The cops are, well, yeah, I'll say that Agent Ron here, or Officer Lance as I call him, he gets the same more or less as Diggle. He's pretty much always going to get 2 in movement, 2 in attack so he can shoot, and then since he's only willpower 5, he usually gets 1 in special so that he can run. So anyway, there's really only a certain number of combinations he's going to get. And the cops, police officer and police woman, they only have 4 willpower. You don't have that much choices to begin with. They're terrible on the attack. There's just no point in having them strike. Just stick 2 in movement, 2 in special. Always give them the option to run, to shine the lantern, to whistle, to arrest, that kind of thing. And yeah, you're good to go. So the counters are not a big deal. Don't feel like I did, like you will be outmatched, outmaneuvered every time because you don't know how to anticipate actions. It's really not that bad. I might be wrong. There might be some crews where you have to make crucial decisions more often. But so far, I would not say that being nervous about distributing counters at the beginning of the turn should be a reason why you wouldn't pick up this game or you wouldn't enjoy it. I think once you start playing it with these, I think it comes quickly and it's not a bad mechanic at all. All right, I don't really want to talk about cost, actual dollar value for playing the game as a reason to get into the game or not to get into the game. I don't want to, but I kind of feel like I have to. In general, it's not too bad. Your crew is going to be, my crew is about 6 models. The largest crews that I've seen so far been about 10 models. I think you can get a group of models to use pretty easily for under $100, and that's not bad for a miniature war game. What your own personal situation is, whether that's acceptable or not acceptable, I can't tell you. There are ways to get cheaper products, but not as many other games. It's a newer game. There's not as much used stuff floating around. It is more difficult to get on the cheap. However, I do want to bring up one thing that may cause people some problems, and that's that getting your models to play with is only part of what you need to do. Besides the rulebook itself, you also have all these other things that you are expected to have to play the game that may not be obvious when you start. The most notable is objective markers. You need a collection of objective markers, at least 3, and possibly more. And those all cost money, unless, like me, you convert them out of different things. Not everyone's in that position to do that. And even with my conversions, I don't have a couple of the objectives that I may find that I want at some point. So you also need street lights and sewer markers. And those are a bit of a sticking point. I looked for a long time for different versions of the night models, sewer markers, and lampposts to use, especially cheaper ones, because I want to spend my money on models. And it was really difficult. I tried model train shops. Turns out people are willing to pay a lot more for model train stuff than they are for wargaming miniature stuff. That was not cheaper at all. There are some MDF options, but I didn't love the looks of a lot of those. So I ended up buying the night model versions, and that's just this extra layer of expense that you have to absorb in order to play the game, especially since the night models, lamppost and sewer markers, and objective markers come in odd quantities. So theoretically, you're going to want 3 sewer markers and 3 lampposts, but the old night models came in packs of 2 for each of those. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It means you're spending more money. It would be a lot more convenient if they gave you a pack of 3. Same for the objective markers. They give you 4 different objective markers, but riddles come in pairs of 2. So if you want to use riddles, you have to come up with another riddle marker from somewhere or buy another pack, which again is problematic. The other thing that I had a problem with is terrain. The scale of these models, and again, it's not 100%, it's a little fluid for the models themselves, but they're larger than your standard 28mm models. They're 35mm, which means that if you've got a table set up for something like The Walking Dead or Mordheim or Warhammer 40K or some other game like that, these guys are going to look too big. The doorways are going to be too small, and it just is going to take away a bit from the visual experience. Also, it's a really particular setting. It's not like Batman's running around in a jungle all the time, or ancient ruins, or something like that. This game is specifically set on the streets of Gotham. So a lot of terrain that you might have that you can use through a number of different miniatures games wouldn't make sense for this one. So again, I have a video about what I did, which is using the shipping containers, and I thought that was a good solution for making a big board really cheaply, really quickly, that I can use in a number of ways, and that's fine, but not everyone is going to have that available to them. It did take a lot of time. It did take a certain amount of investment in the painting and the construction. So again, if it's a thing for you, if it's having a nice board is extremely important, the Batman miniature game is a little limiting in that way. It requires an investment on top of the models, on top of the objective counters, and on top of the rules. And so if you haven't factored that in, you may want to think about it before jumping into this game. Does it mean don't do this? Does it mean if you're a modeler and you love doing this stuff anyway? Does it mean, some people like that and they're going to get into it, and that's great. But yet again, it's one more thing to think about. Related to cost and to hobby is one more thing that I want to talk about, and it's not really a criticism of the game or the way it's set up, or even a reason why you may or may not get into this game, but I just want to mention it because this seems to be the place. And that's unpainted models. So night models are pretty expensive. They come over from Spain. They're generally $20 US for one model, or if you're buying a pack, like a starter pack, they're going to be $10, and that's pretty expensive for miniatures, in my opinion. But they're really, really nice. That's why I got into this game in the first place. I mean, I can appreciate a lot of the Batman stuff. I'm not a huge Batman fan. I didn't read many of his comics. I have an appreciation of some of the movies. I love the video games, and I love the old animated series. But Batman himself isn't going to draw me into a game immediately. What brought me in was how nice these models are. They really are very cool. And I think a lot of other people are attracted by that as well. But what I want to bring up is how many crews I've played against that are unpainted. And I understand that not everyone is an expert painter, but you're paying a lot of money for these models. You're kind of paying a premium for how well they're sculpted. If you want them to really look nice, you kind of have to paint them. If you don't care about how nice they look, I feel like there are a lot of other games that might suit you better. Cheaper games, basically, like why not HeroClix, or why not any game where either the models are of a lower quality, possibly plastic, something like that, or they come pre-painted. If you want to play a game like this, it doesn't make really financial sense to me to not paint the models, because if you just leave them metal, you're not getting the full value out of them. And that also goes for that weird tab they have in their bases. And I know almost every model has a tab like that, but I don't think I've seen anyone play a crew, even professionally painted crews, where the person painting it where they have filled in that tab with putty or basing material or something like that. I see a lot of just open slats, and I think that's bizarre. If you're going to spend the time to paint that model, fill in that tab. So yeah, the last thing I have to say is that, especially in one of the games I played a Mr. Freeze crew, and the cards themselves, so you only have this tiny little picture, this tiny little square to tell you what model is what. And so if you're looking at something like a Mr. Freeze crew where they're all just wearing these hoods and masks and goggles, they all look exactly the same. And if you're looking at it from 2 feet away on the board, and you're just seeing these series of silver models, they all look the same there. And there was a lot of confusion while I was playing these games as to which model was which, because if they're not painted, and the person themselves who's playing didn't paint them, it's hard for them to pick out the differences without these little variations, without being familiar with the model itself from having spent the time painting it. Anyway, it just makes for a better experience, both visually, it makes more sense financially, in my opinion, and when you're actually playing the game, if you've spent the time painting the model, it'll give you a familiarity with which model is which, and also it helps your opponent to determine what model is what when they're playing. Anyway, that's just a quick extra thought, my opinion. Again, although if you don't want to paint models, again, this might not be the game for you, because I think the game really improves with the painted model, more so than even a lot of other games. And I think all games improve with painted models, but this one I think even more so. Alright, so that's my review, overview, pros and cons, questions and concerns. That's my video for the Batman miniature game. I hope it doesn't sound too negative, because again, what I'm doing is I'm addressing the concerns that I had going into this game and how I found those panned out after a couple of games. There's some things that I knew I liked already, and I'm not talking about those right now. And there's things that I discovered while playing that I really like how narrative it is, how much it feels like people in a comic book beating each other up, that I didn't address. So this is just for if you have hesitations, if you have reservations about getting into this game, here's what I found about the ones that I had. So hopefully it doesn't sound too negative. And also some of these things have changed or are different for people who have different tastes than me. For example, a lot of the problems with the expense of the rules, about the complexity of learning from various rule books, and from the cost of acquiring all these counters and markers can be resolved if you want to invest in the Suicide Squad box set, which does a great job. It gives you a little bit of terrain, it gives you all the markers, it gives you 2 crews, and it gives you a pocket rulebook. That actually, if you are interested in that set, it resolves a lot of problems. Me personally, I couldn't bring myself to buy a set based on a movie that I disliked so much. But other people have different opinions. The models are still nice. If you can get over the fact that this is based on the movie Suicide Squad, that really is a good value and a better way of getting into this game. So anyway, I don't want to sound too negative. I have been enjoying the game. I do want to keep playing it, and I hope this has been useful for some of the people who thought like I did. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I will see you on the next one.